Now is the time to make my applications to my next chapter of life for post-secondary. And my mom and dad, we talked about it, and we looked at, my learning style, my pace of learning, and how I wanted to carry out my career. My parents at the time, and also my older brothers, they knew that there's even higher percentages year by year of first-year students dropping out of post-secondary school, whether that might be Queens, Western, Ottawa, and it's no reflection on the institution itself. It's the reflection on the pressures of those 18-year-old, 19-year-old kids who are coming into school. So, we thought that the best opportunity for me, and I agreed, was actually to go to a nearby college. There was a lot of hands-on work. What I mean by hands-on is application in the field. We would go to different recreation sites. We would go to different gyms, and I ended up actually applying and being accepted for a recreation and leisure services diploma. Class sizes were super small, 15 to 20, and it was an amazing experience. Learning how to communicate with others, how to communicate with other people in a management field, in a community center. That was a big skill that I also acquired and learned. Really great experience there too. There were also classmates of mine who we also had to collaborate and build as a team, which I really enjoyed too. And I really understood more about, okay, these are the personality traits that I have, and these are the building blocks and the pieces where those personality traits slot into. And it was always, every day was different. That was the beauty of it as well. Yes, there may have been a little bit less on the academic side, but there was a lot on the application side. Learning more about how to be and practice in the field. So common practice, depending on what your degree or your BA is to have a lot of theory. You're reading textbooks, you read, and then apply it in an essay format or whatever the case. And so for us, for that first 2 years at college, keeping in mind this is now in the late 2000s, 07, 08, 09, it was more about application. Okay, we want you to go into the field, and by into the field, as I said, the community center, the recreation center, the fundraiser, the foundation, and we want you to understand and write notes about how they facilitate their programs. And that could not have been more useful, because actually I remember distinctly coming out and graduating from that program, and here are my colleagues and friends, and they're still trying to kind of pick up the pieces of the real world. They no formal experience in their respective field that they studied, and here I am, I'm like a little bit on my high horse as an early 20-something. I'm like, yep, I've already done that, I understand this, I understand that, and it was so uplifting to have that much more confidence in that field. And I would say, in kind of drawing it into a conclusion, that is really how the pieces unfolded, or the storybook unfolded, about how I found my passion for not only recreation and leisure services, but also personal training and lifestyle coaching. So I've gone through the post-secondary institution, graduated, did really well in my class, and was ready to essentially tackle the world from a career standpoint. And so on and began the application phase to different positions, different professional positions. I finished my degree with a bachelor's of health science. So what opportunities does that explore? You could look at a physiotherapist assistant, athletic therapist assistant, leading into athletic therapy. You could look at a certified personal training coach. As well, you could get into the community recreation center, as well as a community recreation center director, director of programs as well, either at a fitness center or an athletic facility on the community level. So here come all the applications. I am this, young 24, 25-year-old, eager as can be post-secondary student. There are hundreds of thousands of us across Ontario. And I'm in the middle of this application, and my brothers have already gone through the same thing, so they're giving me advice. So okay, you have to treat your application life like a job, full time. Here are these websites. These are these people to talk to. Keep all these people in your back pocket. And so I heed their advice. And there was a little bit of area of friction, I guess you could say, with the application process. What I came to learn was that actually, even at that time, 2013, 2014, 2015, there were still connotations or opinions about names of what people are for their resumes and cover letters. So at the time, I had a fairly unique name for Southern Ontario, or at least this part of the world. And I came to realize one fateful thing, and it did really upset me, and I talked to my parents about it and my brothers, was that I was being discarded. Even though I met the qualifications, I was being discarded for applications based on my name. So you are a person who's onboarding new staff. You see, Matt and Jeff and Eric and Sean. Okay, very common, like these are names that, okay, I can relate with them. Okay, automatically you think, yes, they speak English, they're up to date on pop culture here, they are possibly educated and likely white. And so when you come across a name such as Zolile, automatically my name, and how do I know this? I'll get to that in a moment. My name was discarded in the application process, and how do I know that? So I actually had some friends who were like, well, maybe this is actually what could be happening, man. You're highly qualified, you know your stuff for the position. This is what could be happening. They could just be throwing your name off to the side, because if they see Zolile Mehlomakulu, do you speak English? Do you speak English fluently? Do you dress normally even, right? Do you have an accent? Were you educated here? So there are all these immediate thoughts that come up for a person who's onboarding or interviewing new candidates. So what I did was this. I got a little crafty. I got this suggestion from a friend, who will name nameless for now, is put two applications, same, side by side, no difference. Put two applications into the same positions. Do it for like 3 or 4 different positions, but same replica. Just change the phone number, the address, the email, and your name, and see what happens. And out of those, I think I did maybe 3 or 4. Out of those, I got like 2 or 3 hits back. So say I did 4, I got 3 hits back for the name, like the white name, you could say, or white Anglo-Saxon, however you want to say it. I got hits back for that name for an interview, for a phone call interview. The other one, my true name, nothing. And that kind of just spoke volumes to me. Now, I did not really take it too seriously, because I said, you know what, is this maybe the industry? This could be the type of industry I'm in. They just may not be hiring right now. They may not be hiring people from that university. So all of these, light questions were swirling in my mind. And after that moment, I did come to realize, it was like, wow, there are still people out there who are essentially discriminating against me. I don't even know if I'm the only one. I have a South African last name and first name. There could be other people from other areas of the world where the same exact things are happening. So that was a little bit of area of friction. And thankfully, I landed in a position that I really liked. This was when I was about 26. I worked there for a year and a half. Really built up a community and a group of people, and it was in long-term care. Now, long-term care as an athletic therapist assistant, I was basically responsible for helping the the physical therapist on site with helping the residents remaining more ambulatory and making sure that they're stretching and moving every day. And really, long-term care homes in Southern Ontario, if you do a demographic study, is predominantly white, predominantly women, and either Christian or Catholic background. And all of a sudden, when you have these a staff member who comes in who's 25, 26, with the name, Zolile Mehlomakulu, they treat you a little bit differently. And what do I mean by that is, sometimes I was rejected treatment. Hey, Paul, are you ready for, your wheelchair yoga today? Let's get you moving, man. He's like, I don't want to work with you. Right? And they're very cut and dry, 85 plus demographic. And so I was like, okay, I just handled it very lightly. I said, you know what, that's fine. I would just let my manager know, hey, you know what, this person is refusing, or not refusing, but not accepting treatment. Is there anyone that you want me to refer? Easy. When I got to that position at that long-term care home too, I should say, which was a little bit unsettling for me, my manager suggested that I actually use a different name. I should go with either like Z, like just Z, or Zoe, or my middle name is Evan. And I ended up saying to myself, I was like, okay, you know what, I'll think about that, because everyone here uses their own original name. Why should I not be any different? And you have name tags, very open, and you can see the name and what have you. Everybody's face is on their card, on their personal ID card. So if a resident or a family member or whatever came in, it's like, oh, okay, I see your name, okay, great, I know the spelling, fantastic. And I ended up, maybe it was not the best decision at the time. I ended up going with Evan. And it made it just so much easier for my colleagues, my manager, and other residents, and other people in the departments. And I was like, yeah, okay. And it took some getting used to, really, because I had gone my whole life up until I was 26, people calling me Zoe or Zolile. So it was very foreign to me. And that was kind of the beginning stages of my professional career, and learning more about working in the real world,